Hi guys. So this will be a theory-heavy video where I discuss minor tonality and functionality. But before I do this, let's quickly revise what functionality actually is and major key functionality. So firstly, functionality is the idea that every chord in a progression serves a particular function or purpose. A typical chord progression that sounds interesting will create and then resolve tension. This is where functionality comes in. Some chords create tension and some chords do not. Another way of saying this is that some chords are dissonant and some chords are not. So we created three categories of chords: subdominant or predominant, dominant, and tonic functioning chords. Now in a major key, the sub or predominant functioning chords are the 2 and the 4 chord, and they create some tension. The dominant functioning chords are the 5 and the 7 chord, and they create lots of tension. And the tonic functioning chords are the 1, 3, and 6, and they resolve tension. They have no tension at all. So a typical chord progression would use a subdominant followed by a dominant followed by a tonic functioning chord. So we start with a little bit of tension, then add more tension, and finally resolve that tension so that we're completely at rest at the end. So that way it sounds like, we've resolved, we've reached our final destination, we're home. So following this template, we could create something like a 2-5-1. Or a 4-5-1. Or a 4-7-6. So all these chord progressions sound satisfying and final because they follow our standard template of predominant, dominant, tonic functioning chords. They thus create tension and then resolve that tension, so it gives you a kind of an interesting sounding chord progression that sounds like it moves somewhere and then resolves and reaches a natural conclusion. So subdominant chords have some tension because they contain the fourth of the key, which is the note F in the key of C major, which is the most unstable note in the major scale for reasons that have to do with acoustics, which I'm not going to get into in this video. Whereas dominant functioning chords have lots of tension because they contain both the fourth of the key and the seventh of the key. So again, in the key of C, these would be the notes F and B. Now the fourth and the seventh of a major key are a tritone apart, which is a very dissonant interval. And as dominant functioning chords contain this dissonant interval, they are also considered very dissonant. Now finally, the tonic functioning chords are completely resolved because they do not contain the fourth of the key. Again, F in the key of C major. And so because they don't contain that unstable note, they don't create any tension, they feel completely at rest. Okay, so that's functionality in a major key. So chord progressions that follow the predominant dominant tonic or subdominant dominant tonic formula sound satisfying, and this formula has some logic to it. Right, it has to do with whether a chord contains the unstable note in the key or contains notes that form a dissonant interval, and it kind of sequences those chords in order to create and then resolve tension so that it kind of tells a little narrative. Now, unfortunately, when we change over to a minor key, this logic breaks down. But because this functional structure works so well in a major key, we kind of get used to hearing chord progressions that follow this standard template. We're used to hearing the 2 chord as a subdominant and the 5 chord as a dominant. So we just took that same structure and kind of shoved it into a minor key even though it doesn't really work. So all the degrees, all the chords in a minor key serve the same functions they would in a major key. So the predominant chords are still the 2 and the 4, the dominant chords are still the 5 and the 7, and the tonic chords are still the 1, the 3, and the 6. So in the key of A minor, to keep it simple, the 2 chord, which still has a subdominant function, is the B minor 7 flat 5 chord, which has a tritone in it, right? It's got the B and the F. And so it's quite dissonant. This chord serves a dominant function in the key of C major, but all of a sudden it serves a subdominant function in the key of A minor, the relative minor, which doesn't really make sense. The 5 chord, which again is still a dominant function in a minor key, is E minor 7, which isn't dissonant at all. And E minor 7 serves a tonic function in the key of C major, but all of a sudden it's supposed to serve a dominant function in the key of A minor, which again doesn't really make sense. So the classic 2-5-1 template functional chord progression kind of breaks down when we move into a minor key. We no longer create tension and then resolve it. When we move to a minor key, functionality is broken. Right, that sounds okay, but it doesn't really have the same pull from the dominant to the tonic. It doesn't build tension and then resolve tension in quite the same way as the major key, because the 2 chord is actually quite dissonant. The 5 chord is completely resolved. It's not creating any dissonance at all because it's a minor chord, not a dominant chord. And then the 1 chord is obviously still a resolved chord, a tonic chord. So in a minor key, functionality is broken. But instead of trying to fix it by developing new rules for how functionality should work in a minor key, instead we kind of glued or tacked together a few awkward modifications to make it kind of work again. Specifically, we invented the harmonic minor scale, which sharpens the 7th of the minor key, so that the 5 chord now becomes a dominant chord. So in the key of A minor, we now have a G sharp rather than a G natural. So now we can play a minor 2-5-1, and it kind of works because we've kind of artificially created or shunted in this dominant 5 chord derived from the harmonic minor to create a 5-1 perfect cadence that resolves down to the tonic minor. Right, so that already sounds a lot more interesting and more final and much more functional. It now does sound like we kind of build tension and then resolve it to the tonic. So I'll quickly play the first and the second 2-5-1 sort of sequentially so you can hear the difference. So the first one with the E minor as the 5 chord, the second one with the E7 as the 5 chord. Right, so hopefully you can hear that second one is quite a bit stronger because it's got that 5 dominant chord, which is creating tension and then resolving down to the tonic. But it is kind of an artificial, retrofitted, sort of band-aid solution to the fact that functionality doesn't work in the same way in a minor key. And not only that, someone then went out and invented the melodic minor scale, which has a sharp 6 and a sharp 7 compared to the natural minor. So we have an F sharp and a G sharp in the key of A minor now. So now, if we wanted to play a 2-5-1, we could even play a B minor 7 chord, not a B minor 7 flat 5, because we've got that sharp 6 in the key. Right, the B minor 7 is derived from the melodic minor, E7 is either melodic or harmonic, and then the A minor 7 is back to our natural. So now we have 3 different minor scales we can use. And this is why analyzing songs in a minor key is quite a bit harder. There are 3 scales from which we can derive chords: the natural, harmonic, and melodic minor scales. And songs written in a minor key can use chords or borrow chords from any one of these minor keys, at random, really. So for example, Summertime. Right, so all of those chords are derived from the key of A minor, but sometimes it's the natural minor, like when we use the A minor 7 or the D minor 7 chord. Sometimes it's the melodic minor, like when we use the D7 chord, and sometimes it's the harmonic minor when we use the E7 chord. Similarly, the start of My Funny Valentine. So again, that song is written in the key of C minor and only uses chords from the key of C minor. But again, it uses chords from all 3 C minor scales. The C minor triad can be derived from every minor scale. The C minor major 7 is from the harmonic or melodic. The C minor 7 is from the natural. The C minor 6 is from the melodic. The D half diminished is from the natural. The G7 is from the harmonic or the melodic. Right, it's kind of just a mishmash of chords derived from any of the 3 C minor scales. But the song is all in the key of C minor. It's just one key, the key of C minor. It's just taking chords from 3 different scales. And that's really it. So functionality is very much a major scale, major key concept. But because it works so well, and if you follow the rules, you can create such interesting sounding chord progressions, we took that structure and just plopped it into a minor key. Unfortunately, it doesn't work as well in a minor key, so we kind of had to make some slightly awkward ad hoc modifications in order to fix it, in order for it to somewhat work in a minor key. And it kind of does, right? It works fine. It's been working fine for hundreds of years now. So, we stick to it because it sounds fine, but it's kind of inconsistent. It doesn't quite have the same logic as it does in the major scale. It's kind of just a tack-on that's sort of hanging there somewhat arbitrarily because it kind of works, but we had to make a few awkward modifications to make it work. But it's fine, it does the job. But of course, because we had to make all those awkward modifications, we now have 3 different minor scales, and so when you're analyzing a song in a minor key, you have to take account of the chords from each of those 3 different scales. So it does make it a step harder than analyzing a major key song where you just have one key, one scale, one set of chords. So because of this kind of hodgepodge minor functionality idea that we've made work, you end up having weird inconsistencies in chord progressions, where the same chord can have different functions depending on context. Like take, for example, the following chord progression. So that first B half diminished chord functions as a dominant in the key of C major and resolves down to the sixth chord, A minor 7, which is a tonic functioning chord in the key of C major. But that same B half diminished chord functions as a predominant chord in the key of A minor, moving to the E7, which is our dominant, and then resolving to your tonic chord, A minor. So you have the same chord, B half diminished, resolving to the same ultimate tonic chord, A minor 7, but serving two different functions because it's a dominant functioning chord in C major, but a predominant, subdominant functioning chord in A minor. Right, so logically inconsistent, doesn't really make sense, but it still works, right? Both those little chord progressions sounded nice enough. It still sounded like I built tension and then resolved that tension to the tonic and finalized the chord progression. The fact that you've got the same chord acting in two different roles, you know, bit weird, but we kind of look over it, ignore it, and just pretend everything's okay. You know, if you close your eyes, don't think about it too much, just listen to the chord progression. Sounds pretty enough, sounds like it works, sounds functional. Excellent. That'll do. Cool, and that's it. Thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully that made sense. Hopefully you now understand both how to analyze songs in a minor key and the concept of minor functionality. Cool, I will see you next time. Bye.